Hey, it's iBerry Boy. In today's video, we are going to be going over how you can have fine-grained control over your widget animations using GSAP timelines. And that's going to save you a lot of headache if you're trying to control the timing of your animations and sequence them, as opposed to just using delays that could turn into quite a mess. So here's the widget we're going to be going over. So the logo comes in, and that can be set in the custom fields. So I can set my logo. So that fades in, then the circle is drawn around, then the badges and the username fades in, and then the content of the message pops in. So it all happens in that particular order using GSAP timelines. And we're actually making use of the message queue in this one, because if you set this, let's say to 500 milliseconds, and then I spam the messages, you'll see the animations don't have enough time to play out before the new message is displayed. But if I change this to 1.5 seconds, then I test, you'll see each message has enough time to play out the animation before the new message is displayed. However, that's just for demonstration purposes. We will be removing the duration as a custom field because we want to set that exactly to the duration of our master timeline animation. That way it's 100% accurate for the timing for when the next message should display. The final code for this will be on my Gumroad page as always, and let's get started. Okay, so I have the widget here with all of its styling, but without any of the animations. And we're going to be adding the animations to this widget to demonstrate how to use GSAP timeline animations. So this code is expanding off of the last video where we went over all the basics of setting up a chat widget in Stream Elements. Everything is the same except we changed some of the CSS styling. We added a timeout in the message queue function so that it doesn't display the next message until the animation is finished. And the duration is going to be set to our master timelines duration. And then also the HTML structure of our message element has changed. This is also where we've added the custom field for the logo image. And we're using a ternary operator to show a Stream Elements avatar if the logo image is not set. Okay, so let's start animating the messages. I'm going to leave a comment, animation functions. In here, we'll create the logic to animate the message. So let's create a new function called animate message. And let's pass it the message element. And first, let's just check if the message element exists. And if it does not exist, then we'll just return early. Now let's create the timeline. And to do that, you just call the timeline method on the GSAP object. So GSAP.timeline. Now let's reference the HTML elements in message element. So the elements we're going to animate are the circle SVG right here that has the circle class, the username and badges. It has the username badges class, and then also the message text here that has the message text class. And those are all contained inside of our message element when we set the inner HTML. So we can reference those using query selectors. So I can say dot circle equals message element dot query selector, and then pass in the class name. So this will be dot circle. And as I stated before, we also need the username and badges and the message text. So we'll change this to username badges. And the class is username badges. And then the message and the class is message dash text. Okay, now we can start adding the tween animations to our timeline. And the timeline acts as a container for our tweens, and it makes it way easier to manage the timing of your animations. So you can chain the tweens together and they'll play in that specific order. And you can also add a position argument to your tween, which allows you to get even more precise timing on your animation. So we'll reference our timeline with TL and we'll say dot to. You can create tweens with to, from, or from to. Typically you'll use to though. And then we'll pass it the element we want to animate. That's the circle. Then we'll pass it the duration of the tween, the properties we want to animate, and the ease. So duration we'll set to 0.6. And we're going to be animating the stroke dash offset of the circle to 0. And we'll set the ease to circ.in. So now we can start chaining together the animations in our timeline. So for our next tween, I can say .to. We'll pass it username badges that we created right here. And that is our username badges div right here. And we're just going to fade in the opacity. The duration will be 0.2 seconds. We'll fade in the opacity property to 1. We'll also animate the scale property to 1. And we'll set the ease to power1.in. Now I can also add a position argument to control the timing of the tween even more. So for example, I can say minus equal 50%, and that will insert this tween halfway through this circle animation's duration. Okay, and then we're going to add one more tween for the message text. We'll pass it the message, set the duration to 0.3. We're going to animate the opacity to 1 so that it fades in. And then for the ease, we'll do power1.out. And we're going to add an onComplete. And this is going to be a function that fires off after this timeline completes, since this is the last tween in the timeline. So after the timeline completes, we'll call the remove message function, which we have up here in our utility functions. It just removes the last child element from our chat container after it exceeds the max messages. And then let's add a position argument that sets the tween to 0.2 seconds after the username badges tween. And then last for this timeline, we're going to use the .add method to add a callback function that's going to handle our garbage collection. Once the reference to the timeline leaves the stack, which would happen after this function gets fired off, it would lose reference to the timeline, which would garbage collect it for us. But I'm just doing it for performance reasons. So say tl.kill, and that will kill the timeline. And we'll just clear the reference to the timeline by setting it to null. And that's why we use the let keyword to create this variable, so we could assign it to null later on. And then last, we're going to just return this timeline. Because you can nest timelines, we're going to nest this in our master timeline. So we're returning a timeline. So if I come down to my display chat message function, I can store that timeline from the function's return value. Const message timeline is equal to animate message, and pass it the message element. And then if I console.log the message timeline, and I go over to the console, you see I get back the timeline. So now that we have our message timeline, in the top of the display chat message function, I'm going to create another timeline, and that will be our master timeline. So I'll say const master is equal to GSAP timeline. And then in this function, after we got the message timeline, I can just add that and nest it to the master timeline. So I'll say master.add message timeline. And then since we're animating the opacity to 1 for the username badges and message, we need to make sure in our CSS that that is set to 0 for the starting values. I'll set that to 0. Now if I click done, you'll see our animations are coming in now. And it's animating in the exact order we set in our timeline. Now there's one more thing I want to do is after we add the message timeline to our master timeline, I'm going to add a callback function. And just to ensure our message queue waits until the animation is finished, until the next message is displayed, we'll say duration is equal to master.duration times 1000. Because we're doing in milliseconds. And then let's also handle the garbage collection. So I'll add another callback function, and we'll just kill the master timeline and also clear the reference to the timeline. So master is equal to null. And change this to let so that we can reassign the value. And then if you wanted, you could just console.log the duration And then you could check in your console what the duration is and set that to the duration of the global variable here. And you could remove that if you wanted. So that's everything. So I hope this helps you sequence your animations. It's very useful for these Stream Elements widgets. And it's a lot better than using delays, which could turn into quite a mess. So use GSAP timelines if you need fine-grained control over the timing of your animations. So thanks guys, see you next time. Peace.